Welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about the 5 hidden stages of relationship conflict. And as you know, I'm Marlene Chisholm, and I do these LinkedIn Lives, these office hours, usually once a month, but I've skipped a few here lately. I'm really excited you're here. There's over 200 that joined this one, and I'm sure some will be watching later. So, welcome to all of you who are going to be watching later. I'll start by saying that many leaders avoid honest conversations because they fear that honest conversations would ignite conflict with the other person. And the narrative goes something like this: oh, they'll be so surprised, or we're both going to feel bad if I say what I need to say. Or a common one is they might cry, and I can't stand to see people cry. Or harsh words are going to be spoken, trust is going to be lost. And there's truth in all of that. So let's be honest. I think it's more difficult than ever in today's time to have really honest conversations with the right intention without the conversation turning into a huge conflict. So before we get started into these 5 hidden stages, I want to share some research to frame the topic. And I have some slides that I'm going to share. And if you're here, also, I'd love to see um, your name in the comment. Let me know where you're from. I'll check in a little bit. Hi there, Alicia. So glad you're here. So I'm going to share a few little slides to share some of this research. 1/3 of U.S. workers believe that workplace conflict will increase over the next 12 months. Over the next 12 months, most of us think that workplace conflict is going to increase. I don't think that's a big surprise to most people. Here's another one. Workers who rate their workplace as uncivil are over 3 times more likely to be dissatisfied with their job. Now, don't we just kind of know that? Do we need a white paper for that? I'm not sure that we do. I think we understand that when it's uncomfortable in the workplace, when there's drama, when we don't know how to manage our own conflict, when leaders don't know how to manage conflict, then we're going to be dissatisfied. So that's not anything that's especially new. So here's another one. I'll make that bigger for you. I thought this was really interesting. This is the SHRM Civility Index. Only 25% of workers believe their managers are effective at handling incivility. Well, I would say that's true because it's difficult, and most managers are not given the support, the coaching, the training that they need. And our world is just difficult right now. Look at social media. That's a snapshot of what's going on. And sometimes leaders, their hands are kind of cuffed and they're not able to do some of the things they need to do. So no wonder workers believe that. And in daily life, over 7 million acts of incivility happen per hour. Now, when you think about that in daily life, that's driving to the grocery store in a traffic jam. Someone gives an obscene flipping off you when you're in traffic, that someone honks. Anymore, it's so scary to just have a moment because we don't know if there's going to be a fight erupt because of it. And then more than 50% of US workers believe our society is uncivil. So that's some of the research that I found. I'm going to check in real quick. I'm going to say hi to some other people. Hi, Terry from Atlanta, Georgia. Lee, I'm glad you're here from Washington. And Stephen Mock, David Patterson, Ruth Penman, Robert Rogers, Andrea. I don't know how you say that, Andrea, but glad you're here from Italy. That's why I can't say it. But anyway, I'm glad all of you are here. I know there's going to be more coming through. So I shared that, and here's what I'm seeing. I mean, everybody's becoming an expert in conflict right now, I've noticed. Everybody's popping out of the woodwork and they're an expert on conflict and they've got all kinds of things to say. You see it on Instagram, you see it on TikTok, you see a lot of tips and tricks to try to help improve relationships and make the workplace more civil and make society a civil society. And the truth is, I watch these things and I love it because I can use all the help I can get. I study and research conflict management and relationships, but I don't believe that tips, tricks, and so on is going to really fix the problem. So I think, let me share this next slide to kind of go into where I'm going. I don't think civility is going to happen by learning tactics, tips, and tricks. I believe it's going to take more than that. And the reason I think that is because once our programming takes over, we can learn all the tips and tricks. But if we don't do that inner work, it's only going to help to on the surface. I think we have to come from a bigger place, and I think we have to work on our inner game. So I'm going to talk about those two things, that I'm going to share a snapshot of what I'm going to be going into on those five, because some people have to leave and you'll come back in and watch the recording later. But I'm going to share these two, then I'll share a snapshot, and then we'll go into depth on each one of the hidden pieces. So first, we have to come from a bigger place. What I mean by that is, I think that everyone, not just in the workplace, I think as an individual, we have to know our values. What are our top values? What is our mission statement? What is your mission statement? I will never forget when I created my mission statement. And I was so excited because I thought, this is going to change my life and it's going to be easy. It gives me a North Star. And I said that my mission statement was going to be, and I was still a factory worker at this time. This was 25 years ago. I had a vision for my life. I'm doing the thing I wanted to do. And so I have manifested that vision. But I said my mission is going to be to improve communication and relationships everywhere. That felt like I got that on a download. The only problem was it was difficult to do. It was easy to say, and it was fun to write the little saying. And I put, I care, improving communication and relationships everywhere. And the actual corporate business name that I have is I Care Presentations, because that's where I was 25 years ago. So I kept that, and I now go by Marlene Chisholm Consulting. But eye care was difficult because I had to start seeing where I needed course correction, which was eye rolling and sarcasm and interrupting. Wow, I had so much to work on. So transformation, that feeling of transformation can happen at a moment when you get new insight, but when you actually put it to work, it's going to be a lot of change management within yourself. So I think that this is what's going to help us, is when we decide we have something that we want to live by and we need to practice it, because this truly changed my life. It wasn't just a statement on a brochure. I tested it. I saw how difficult it was to live it. And now, 25 years later, I'm still doing that work of improving communication and relationships. It's through coaching, it's through teaching, it's through training, it's through keynoting. And eventually, it's going to be through an online program that I'm developing that's going to be based on this seventh chapter of my book, From Conflict to Courage, to actually give those tools to people that want a deeper study. So I think the first thing is we have to come from a bigger place. Secondly, we have to work on our inner game. And I talk about that in my book, From Conflict to Courage. We don't talk about inner game enough in business because it sounds so woo woo. It sounds touchy feely. We're gonna face the east. We're gonna chant. We're gonna do all these things. But truly, if you're unstable within, you're going to have conflict. There is no conflict unless there's an inner conflict first. And your relationships are a mirror to what's going on inside of you. I'm sure you've probably heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. So you have to gain the capacity to regulate yourself and work on your character. So what's helped so many of my own clients is to understand that your relationships are that mirror, and you can quickly, if you can quickly uncover those five stages that indicate conflict is progressing, then you can lead more effectively in your personal and professional life. So I'm going to be sharing those five hidden pieces of conflict, how the stages of it, and I'm going to try to apply it not only to your personal life, but how it shows up in the workplace and even in society. So I'm looking in here. If there's any questions, please let me know. I'm seeing some people from Toronto and from Canada, Kim and Cheryl. Thank you for being here. Hi, Connie, someone I've known for a very long time. Leticia Ramirez, from San Marcos, Texas. I'm so glad you're all here. I want to invite you too, that if you like this, you can share it later on your own thread, and it's going to be recorded so you can share it with your employees or your team if you want to. So let's talk about, I'm going to give you a snapshot. Here we go. Here's the snapshot of the different stages of relationship conflict. I'm going to go through these one-on-one. The first one is inner disturbance. The second one is justifying. The third one is seeing them as an adversary. And fourth is seeking social proof. And fifth is aggression. So that's the five pieces five stages I'm going to talk about first. So let's now talk about stage one, inner disturbance. This one, you have to start to notice. You're going to become an extremely sensitive person if you start to notice your inner disturbance. Most of us go about our day, and then when we're triggered, we think it was just right there in the moment. But a lot of times we've been building up on some sort of resentment. Something's been bothering us for a while with another person, and we don't really notice it. We brush it off. We go about our business. There's so much noise, so much distraction. So here's kind of how you know. If you constantly feel bad after an interaction with someone, that's a chance that is telling you that there's gonna be some conflict later. I know in the beginning years, I would often feel blindsided by, I think, well-meaning consultants that would meet with me to tell me that they loved my work, but then when we met, they had all kinds of unsolicited advice, which at that early stage made me feel criticized. So I was constantly feeling some inner disturbance with people that perhaps wanted to be my colleague, but they weren't reading the signs, or else I wasn't able to speak directly as to what I was needing at that time. Another way that you might notice inner disturbance is the person just interrupts you, or they use innuendo, or they discount your ideas, but you say nothing. I have an example of, I was working with someone at one time that just made fun of me a lot, and it was kind of couched in joking. And at first, I thought it was fun, so I went along with it. But then it started feeling sensitive, and it started feeling like I was being bullied and picked on. Now, I am not coming from the place of you should go report this to HR the moment that, like, if something's been going on, you owe it to the person that you have the problem with to say, hey, by the way, is that, are you having fun or are you making fun? Because I'm starting to feel picked on. And unless you're able to do that, it continues to escalate into the next level of the hidden conflict stages. So here's the question you want to ask yourself if you notice inner disturbance with another person. Am I pretending things are okay when they aren't? Because you contribute to it if you're not being honest with the person or people that are making you not feel included, or that are saying things that are hurtful, ignoring you, discounting you. You have to be vulnerable, and you have to ask the question, I'm not sure what the intention is. This is how I'm feeling, because otherwise it's going to just escalate and elevate. So, stage two, justifying. Here's how we brush it off. We say, well, they're just joking, or I'm just being sensitive, or we psychoanalyze them. Well, I wonder if it's because they had a rough childhood, or they lost their job last year, they've been through a rough divorce. We start psychoanalyzing, justifying what someone does. And then we also excuse ourselves and the role that we play in this. For example, we excuse our sarcasm or our own passive aggressive responses. We get into the game. It's sort of like we take the bait, and then we just justify it. Well, that's just what we do. And yet there's a bad feeling. So you're now at stage two. And the coping mechanism is often just rationalizing their behavior or theirs. But you have to remember that these rationalizations only keep the pattern in play, and they do not change behavior. They don't change their behavior. It doesn't change ours. So I'm going to give you some questions to ask yourself. Do I feel supported or do I feel discounted? That's a question in your relationships. Do I feel supported or do I feel discounted? And do I still trust them to have my best interests? Sometimes we just stay in relationship dysfunction and we don't ask ourselves the question, why do I keep coming back for more? And if the answer is no, I guarantee it's time for a conversation, or it's at least a pause to question intentions. If you have my book, I share some ways to do that. It doesn't have to be confrontational. And I can also guarantee that if you do that, the other person's always going to say, oh, no, that wasn't me. You're just too sensitive. Or, oh, I can't believe that that bothered you. But here's what I want to say, they often change their behavior anyway. You caught them off guard. They felt blindsided. They didn't know that they had this pattern. And generally, they will think deeply. If this stung a little bit, they'll think deeply and they will change the behavior. So you don't need to keep pressing it. You don't need to give proof, but that's what you need to do at that stage. Now, stage three, seeing them as an adversary. They're no longer a friend, they're the enemy. This starts to show up in silent resentment or measuring your words so that you don't get caught in a trap. You don't feel safe around this person in this relationship. Think about the effect of this on teamwork. When people in the same department don't trust each other and they're afraid that anything they say is going to be used against them, all of a sudden you're just protecting your own back. You're not really working with the person or the people that you need to be working with. So this really hampers productivity. And the reality at this point is that unfortunately you get what you look for. So you don't want to be naive, but at the same time, we start to get the evidence of anything that we look for. That's why it's so imperative to have conversations when you start to feel that way, because what you focus on expands. And the us versus them mentality is alive and well in personal relationships as it is in our own country. And if you'll notice that on social media, I would say if it's not just among friends, not specifically on LinkedIn, more on other platforms, but if you happen to comment or go outside of your own little network, it's almost obvious that it's a them or an us when it comes to political or religious division. And we're already seeing each other as enemies. We're unable to ask a question, have a disagreement. It becomes pretty violent, volatile online. And I mentioned this in 2022. It's already 2 years later, and it seems to be getting worse and worse. So often on social media, and that's not in the workplace, but look at social media and compare it to your relationships, compare it to your workplace, and see that it is getting worse and worse to where there's so much division, and folks were getting ready for more because here in the US, we're getting ready for an election. So it's not going to be pretty. And I tell you that so that you can know what you can do, which is to maintain civility. I often say that disagreement doesn't hurt relationships, disrespect does. So once we start to see people as the enemy, the disrespect is not hard to follow. So I'm going to switch over real quick and see if anybody's got any things that they want to say. I'm seeing hi there from Connecticut, and good evening from India. So we got some people from across the world in different places. Got Salem, Oregon, Stephen. Hi there, David Patterson. So glad you're here. Now, if you have questions later, you have comments, you can definitely put comments in here. The way that this works is I can see when you let me know you're here, but sometimes that thread doesn't show up till later. So I might miss a question, but I will always go back later in the day and review this, and I'll try to answer questions. You can always direct message me if you have something that you want to say. So I'm willing to talk with you further and not just on this thread. So let's look at stage 4, seeking social proof. Once again, that's exactly where people start on social media. It's not even about getting to know someone, learning about them, having common interest. The first thing that's happening is seeking social proof. Now, when we're in relationship conflict in our personal lives or even in the workplace, whether it's your spouse, a friend, a colleague, a partner, when you start to seek social proof, it's gone too far. And how that shows up is a strong need to win. You need to be right and you want to make them wrong. There's not much grace. And if there is, it's kind of pseudo grace, and to where you're trying to be better than them because you're so understanding. There's this desire to get others to agree with you. Again, look at social media threads. You'll see threads where everybody agrees, and you'll see threads where there's a lot of fighting. But the truth is, we just want to be right about what we believe, and we don't want to ask a question or consider changing our minds. And that happens in the workplace. And that's why in the workplace, what I see is when someone's got the authority, they just move someone to a different department instead of having that conversation. And I say that's like clipping off a field of dandelions, clipping off the blooms, and then saying, "See, I solved the problem." But then the next season, you've got a whole new field of dandelions, and they've multiplied. So without having conversations, without addressing the issue at the root, you're only putting a band-aid on things. You're only clipping the dandelion heads off of the top, and the root system is still alive and well. That's why, as leaders, when you start seeing that there's this need for social proof about who's right and who's wrong, it is time to intervene. And if you don't know how to, you need to get the capacity and the skills. It's not easy. It doesn't feel good, but it's a muscle. It's not a one time watching a video or even today. It's like a bath. It doesn't last forever. It's a practice. You do it all the time and you work on it. We seem to get satisfaction if others agree. That's with this fourth layer. We do this gossip like, does Jim come off rude to you? Is it just me? Or do you agree? And we're so happy. And I know sometimes we need to talk it out. We need that that confirmation that we're not being too sensitive. But that is a sign that a conversation with Jim actually needs to happen versus talking about Jim. So if you find yourself doing that, say to yourself, okay, so I'm preoccupied with this. It's time for me to figure out my way of reconnecting with Jim and getting clearing this off, getting that elephant out of the room, and getting this on the table so that we can resolve this conflict that's brewing. Here's two questions to ask. So, what needs to stop or what needs to start? Because if you don't ask that question, you're going to get into a lot of generalities and you're going to psychoanalyze and you're going to talk about their personality. But really, what needs to stop or start? And then you can start to set expectations. For example, in a meeting, I was on a thread the other day where someone was asking, what do you do if you're moderating a meeting and someone jumps up and they throw the meeting off and they start being really aggressive? Well, that's scary. That's a nightmare, and that reality is that it can happen in today's time. But if you set expectations and get agreement in the beginning with everybody there in a meeting, that's one way that you get back to the very first stage and you don't stay in stage 4 or 5. So what needs to stop? What needs to start? And what are your choices? You need to know this. This is being strategic. What are their choices if they won't work with you? You have to remember that you're not powerless. You do have choices. And if you don't recognize those choices, you're going to get into stage 5, which is aggression. And it doesn't take a lot for me to tell you what that is. Maybe you're kind of a aggressive person, or maybe you're around someone who's that way, but it includes blowing up, threats, name calling. That's when it goes really off the rails, and then all the way to violence. And I think we're going to start seeing that at the grocery stores, at the banks, in traffic lines, because we're seeing it elevate already. And while social media is just one aspect, we get desensitized. And as we get desensitized and we don't feel this strong urge to live by values and we're busy looking at what everyone else is doing wrong, then we get caught up in it and become part of the problem. And part of that self-righteous, look at me, I don't do this, you do, I'm the right religion, you're not, I'm the right political party, you don't get, you have a clue. How can you be so clueless? Once you get to that stage, you're almost toward violence. So as leaders, we have to guide the conversations. We have to be examples, even when it's a little bit painful, to not blow up or to not say that rude thing or to not give it more energy. We have to be able to self regulate. So here's the questions that you might want to ask in this situation. Not about them. Am I being my best self? Am I proud of myself tomorrow? Is this something that I feel like I lived the example? It hurt in the moment, but I'm living that example. And does the energy I bring to this make the world or this situation a better place? So that's the questions that you want to ask. Now, I'm going to show you once again these 5, and then I'm going to do a conclusion. And I see more people joining. I'm so glad you're here. Italy, Maryland, Oklahoma, London. Thank you everyone for on your time zone being here. So here's the 5 stages we've talked about: inner disturbance, justifying, seeing them as the enemy, seeking social proof, and aggression. Those are the 5. And you can watch this again later. I know that I talk really fast. I try to keep these under 30 minutes. And so we're right at 5 more minutes. So I'm going to go into the conclusion. So when you notice inner disturbance, that's stage 1, it's the best time to decide what you need. You may need to set a boundary. You might need to ask for what you want. You might need to represent yourself. But just know that the more people who are experiencing inner conflict, they're not at peace within, the more outer conflict we're going to see on social media, in the workplace, in our family lives, and in the world. And the best thing that a leader can do right now is to come from a bigger place. That's their mission and their values, and then work on the inner game, and then skills come next. So if you only work on skills, you're going to wonder why it's not working. Is you don't have the inner fortitude is why. And so next, realize that your relationships are a mirror of your inner game. If you're at war within, you're going to be at war without. If you're peace within, peace without. So a great practice is work on your personal relationships. Notice the 5 hidden stages with your partner, your spouse, your friends, your colleagues. Work on those and notice those 5 hidden stages and compare that with what's happening in the world, in the workplace, and then again in your personal lives. So, I've got a quick announcement to make. I am working on a new course about mastering conflict conversations to be launched in the fall. It's based on chapter 7 from Conflict to Courage. It's a framework that's going to help you have tough conversations. And it's tools also that you can use to coach employees. So, while it's a framework, there's specific tools and examples. It's going a little bit deeper than the book. So, sign up on the wait list if you want to be notified when it first becomes available because it's going to be at the least expensive at that time. And I'm also booking speaking engagements for the fall of 2024 and spring of 2025. So if you're interested in working with me for a keynote, a half day workshop, or more in your organization or your association, email me or direct message me and we can have an exploratory conversation. I've got some flyers I can send to share with you what I'm doing right now. And finally, if you got value from this, please share this on your own timeline and share with your employees. And you can visit my website for more at www.marlenechisholm.com. Thank you so much, everybody. And please share on your own timeline.